What's up, y'all, and welcome into today's video. I'm so glad that you found our A Catholic Perspective series, where we dive into our favorite TV shows, movies, and tell you what we think about them and how they may or may not connect to our faith. Today, we're tackling Moon Knight, which, I think all MCU shows should be. That's my hot take to get us started. Hope y'all enjoy. So, if you're unfamiliar with the character of Moon Knight or the show, then join everybody else who watched this show, because you had to be like a really deep comic nerd to really know who Moon Knight was, and I wasn't. A lot of similarities to Batman, somebody that we all are probably pretty familiar with, but the big thing with him is that he has a lot of mental issues. So they call it dissociative, what do they call it? Dissociative identity disorder, like split personality kind of thing, right? And it's fascinating. I got to learn about this. Now, I'm not saying that the show was like the perfect representation of it, because I don't know. I'm not a mental health professional, but I thought it was really cool how they handled it. They handled it with grace, and they handled it well. I loved the back and forth. So Oscar Isaac plays the main character, or characters, however you want to look at it. So in the first few episodes, we have Mark Spector, and then we have Stephen Grant. So Mark Spector is kind of the big bad A. I'll put it that way. He's really good at fighting. He's tremendous. He's like the Moon Knight, right? Then you have Stephen Grant, who's like this simple. He's really smart, but he wants a simple life, kind of quiet. He's got a terrible British accent, things like that, right? The back and forth between them is tremendous, because essentially they are the same person. They're two different identities within the same person. It's really cool to watch the two of them interact, and it's really cool to watch Oscar Isaac play these two characters. For me, I thought like the first episode was such a cool introduction to this character that I knew almost nothing about. And one of the things that the show does very well is the sense of mystery. Some shows, a lot of the MCU shows have used mystery to, varying degrees of goodness, right? So like WandaVision, there was a lot of mystery in that show. Loki, there's a lot of mystery in that show. And I think a lot of times they just didn't really pay off a lot on the mystery, because part of mystery is that it's something that you can know something about, but not everything about. That's like the church definition of mystery, right? Like God, like we can know about God, we just can't know everything about God. Well, like I thought this did a very good job of being a good mystery, where like I'm intrigued and want to keep coming back and learning more, but some of those other shows I felt like just never answered our questions, right? And I think a lot of our questions get answered throughout the course of this 6-episode run. So I think that this show really handled mystery in a way that I really, really appreciate. And with the introduction of the character in episode 1, not only was it a cool introduction, but like we got to see Moon Knight, like the actual, it would think like Batman dressed up in his cape, right? Which, by the way, I didn't say that there are spoilers. If you're already this far and you didn't know there's spoilers for the whole show. Okay, I don't know why you'd be watching this if you had watched it already. But such a cool ending to episode 1, and like they had me hooked. Like I'm introduced to this new character. There's some this air of mystery about him, and then the ending was just really cool with like the classic superhero fight scene. So those first couple episodes is Mark and Steven kind of getting to know each other, because essentially they're adults, but they didn't they weren't taking over each other, taking over the body, essentially, right? This is a new thing that they're dealing with, and that comes into play later, part of the mystery. Episode 3 goes into Egypt. So they go over. So the way that Mark Spector is Moon Knight is that the Egyptian gods come into a huge play. So like Ammit, Khonshu, a lot of these these people that we learned about growing up in school. Where the Egyptian gods are, we get to meet them in episodes 3 and 4. We kind of knew about Khonshu, we knew about Ammit. So Khonshu is like the god of that makes Mark Moon Knight. Like he gives him his power. He's his avatar, right? So essentially, Mark agreed to be the avatar. Khonshu gave him all these incredible powers that make him essentially Batman. Batman with healing powers, essentially. So what was I going to say? Oh yeah, and then Ammit is kind of the bad guy, the bad god in the series. But one of the most interesting things that from a faith perspective that I saw was like anytime you introduce gods into something, it's like, okay, how is this going to go. And the way that they introduce the Egyptian gods is that they all have these avatars, these human bodies that they embody. Like their spirit takes over these bodies, and so they bring them all together. And what's interesting is a lot of the gods, they're essentially saying like that people quit caring about us, so we quit caring about them. So you think about like the Egyptian gods, like, they were worshipped for years and years and years. We hear about them in Bible times and all this kind of stuff. And essentially people stopped worshiping them. People stopped praying to them. So they gave up on humanity, and they're just like, they're essentially what like a lot of people think that like God is, right? He just kind of created things and then backed off and just kind of let things go. But what's fascinating is that Khonshu is shown at the time as the only god who still thought humanity was worth fighting for, right? And Khonshu's not perfect. We see some flaws. He's manipulative and these sorts of things, but he cares about humanity still. He still wants to be a good force in the world. And I just thought about that kind of back and forth because I think about it a lot with Christianity. Like Christianity is the only religion in the whole world where God became man to come and be a part of our lives, right? When Jesus became man to walk amongst us, to teach us how to live and to save us, right? Now, obviously, there's not this equal parallel between Jesus and Khonshu, but this idea of like God's being far off and like not wanting to be involved, I feel is like what a lot of people feel about God. But Khonshu is one of the few that's like, no, I'm going to step in and I'm actually going to be a force ultimately for good, right? We see this at the end of one of the middle episodes. So Khonshu's already kind of in trouble with the gods because the rest of the gods are just kind of tired of humanity and tired of him, stepping in and helping humanity. But so they've already kind of threatened him once, and they're like, hey man, we're going to lock you essentially in their prison, which is turning them into a stone, right? But Khonshu, in order to be able to fight against Emmet, the main bad god, he has to turn back time to like thousands of years ago to help Mark and to help Mark and Steven. And by doing so, he knows that he's sacrificing himself. Like the other gods are going to come punish him and take him away, right? So I just thought that was really neat that this god Khonshu, who this character who's flawed, he's been seen as manipulative. We're not sure if he's the bad guy at times, but here he completely sacrifices himself on behalf of these people to stop the villain. And I thought that was just really cool that like both Khonshu and Mark are these heroes that are imperfect. Because a lot of times we look at our heroes and we want them to be perfect, like Superman. Or we look at like Catholic saints and we think, oh, they were all perfect. But they weren't. Like they're all flawed human beings just like you and me, but they chose to do the good thing even with their flaws, right? So I just found that pretty inspiring. As this is going on, Mark and Steven are still getting to know getting to know each other. And, but a lot of times Mark is the guy, he's like, anytime there's a fight, he's like, give me the body, like, let me take control because Steven can't, help himself, right? But then ultimately Steven is able to become somewhat of a fighter, but still Mark is like, I want to be in control. I want to be in control. We get to this point where they need a translator, and Steven is the smart one. Like Steven is the one that can translate. So Mark freely gives over control of the body instead of having to fight for it back and forth. Another cool moment of character growth, right? Of Mark being the guy, like, I have to be in charge, and realizing like, no, it's actually better in this moment if Mark takes the lead. And like I don't deal with, dissociative identity disorder, but like just being a person, like I'm a person who likes being in charge of things. So like giving control of something over is a little difficult. And I just saw that in his character growth. That was inspiring to me to be like, look, like, maybe it is better that you're in charge in this certain situation, but in other situations, other people are better, right? Just like how the body of Christ works together. Like we are all gifted with different things. We need to kind of take a back burner to other people at different times. So I think one of the greatest things that this show does is the mystery and how it unravels through the series. In episode 4 and 5, even more mystery gets added where it kind of keeps you on your toes. You're not sure, is this real? What's the real world? Because they show Mark and Steven in a mental institution. Like, is this whole show real? Is the hospital real? Is what's going on in the show real? And it's just kind of this question that gets opened up for you to ponder the whole rest of the show. And I just love the mystery element of that. So there's 2 episodes left. In episode 5, an absolute heart wrencher. If you haven't watched 5 yet, it's the kind of the explainer episode for why Mark struggles with dissociative identity disorder, with DID. And essentially, when Mark was really young, he had a brother, and he was in charge of taking care of this brother. They go into this cave. The water starts to rise. The brother drowns. Tragically passes away, and the mom blames Mark. So Mark is dealing with the death of his brother, where he feels responsible for, and his mom is like terrible to him, like really terrible. Like, it was kind of heart-wrenching to watch, where the mom blames him, right? And that's when this kind of split in his mind happens. And he, you see, the whole time where like the eyes have been going up and like the screen shaking, showing that they're changing back and forth between Mark and Steven. It happens for the first time then, when the mom's yelling at him. And essentially what Mark did was like, I'm going to be the badass, and I'm going to protect Steven so Steven can live a normal life and not have to deal with any of this stuff. Which is, I can get that. Like, I can get like the idea of like, I've dealt with it myself, of like wanting to protect people from harm and kind of taking all the harm upon myself. And it might not be the best choice, because like, when sometimes it's good, right? It's a good quality to have in a friend, right? As a husband, especially as a father. But sometimes it's like, I'm taking too much of the beating, on behalf of other people. And like, I'm going to break, or I'm going to like, become like Mark and start hitting people and all this kind of stuff. Right. So obviously not healthy, but we get to see them kind of work through this throughout the rest of the series. So now we get to the final episode, and I love this show. So before we get to the final episode, I think that this show, Moon Knight, is the best new Marvel Disney Plus shows. Like, in the Disney Plus era, this is the best show that Disney has made, that Marvel has made. I still think like the old school Daredevil, which I just saw that they're bringing back. I'm really excited for that. Still think Daredevil's better, Punisher's better. But this is really close. It might even beat out Punisher for that second spot. Punisher season 1 still has a really special place in my heart, though. The fights were really cool. So like, these avatars, the humans, have been fighting the whole series, but now there's these beautiful shots. And like, I had to shout out to the director. Like, it's really cool. Like, when they went to Egypt in the show, they brought in an Egyptian director who's, pretty relatively famous. I looked him up. And they got to have an Egyptian director for the first time, for representation. We're getting to some more representation stuff here in a second, but they were just directed and beautiful. Like, this show was beautiful to look at. And directing with the mystery, just some incredible stuff. The final episode fights, though. So like, there's this shot of Mark and Harrow fighting back and forth, right? But in the background, the two guys that they are the avatars for are fighting in the background. It's this beautiful shot of like, humans fighting and then the gods fighting, which is, it's kind of interesting, because that's how I've pictured spiritual warfare a lot, right? Like, things are going bad in my life, or things are going bad between myself and another person. I have pictured like God and Satan fighting, or like, an angel and a demon fighting in the background. And just kind of a tremendous shot there. It kind of looked like like a Godzilla fight in the background while you're having like the cool superhero fight down on the ground. I just thought it was really well done. Layla, who's the love interest in the series, gets a huge glow up in the final episode. She like essentially becomes a superhero, which is cool. Like, we talked about representation. Like, not only is it another female superhero, but it's the first Egyptian superhero. Now, they were a little cheesy in how they said that. There's this little kid like, "Are you the first Egyptian hero or superhero?" She's like, "Yes." It's like, I think we could have done with a little bit of subtext there. Like, we got it, but I did think it was really cool. Her costume was really cool. So we said that Moon Knight is kind of like Batman. She's kind of like Hawk Girl from DC, but just looked really cool. The stinger was awesome. So, like Marvel does very well, the stinger at the end was really cool. So essentially, as Mark and Steven are going back and forth, there's a couple of times where they realize, after they switch control of the body, that like, they're not really sure, like, was that you? And sure enough, the whole time, they have a third identity, who's even like more of a kind of hard ass than Mark is, Jake Lockley. And we get to meet him in the stinger, and he takes care of Hera. So, should I do my? I guess I'm going to do my issue at the ending, and then I'll have one more good thing to say. So essentially, the whole big fight between Khonshu and Ammit the whole time was that Khonshu was like using Moon Knight as like essentially his avatar for justice. Like anytime somebody did something wrong, Moon Knight would go out and beat him up or kill him or whatever. But it was always like criminals, people who did things bad, people who were killing people, all these things, right? He was arguing with Ammit, where essentially Ammit was saying like he could like essentially read the soul for the whole future, where if somebody was going to do something bad in the future, they would kill them now. But the issue was they were innocent at the time. So first of all, that's just a fascinating, thing to think about, right? I think a few shows have thought about it. I even think about it like in Christianity. Like if you know that somebody's going to kill somebody, like what is the just thing to do? But they haven't really committed anything yet, right? Well, let's say somebody's going to murder somebody in 25 years. Like, well, it's the whole like, would you kill baby Hitler if you went back in time? It's like, well, he's going to do bad things, but at the same time, he hasn't done anything wrong yet. So it's this interesting kind of exploration of justice. And obviously, like I err on the side of Khonshu, like justice happens after people do bad things. So, but what the linchpin of the whole series, essentially like how that final fight ends is frustrating to me. Is the worst line I think in the whole show, because Mark is essentially fighting against Harrow, who's the bad guy played by Ethan Hawke, who does a great job. And Khonshu's like, you need to kill him. And like in the all throughout the show, but especially in the final episode, like Harrow has been murdering tons and tons of people, right? He has just done bad things. And essentially Mark looks at Khonshu, and when Khonshu's telling him to kill him, like out of justice, right? And Mark essentially says like, no, you just think it's because he's going to kill again. You're starting to sound like Ammit. And he walks away and doesn't do justice, right? Whenever that's kind of his whole thing. And it bothered me. Not because like it bothers me when someone doesn't die, but it bothered me that they kind of used that as the linchpin and the turning point of the series, because like justice is due. Now I'm not saying you have to give the person the death penalty. That's not what I'm saying at all. But there was like, you have to take care, especially I'm talking about like especially in the series. It's like Mark's already taken care of a bunch of bad people, and now the worst person is here, and he's like, oh, I'm not going to do it just because you think he's going to do something again. It's like, no, he's done bad things. He just murdered dozens, if not more people this episode. Like justice was due, right? So it's this interesting thing, like within Christianity, like God is known as the just judge. Like justice is a real thing. Like whenever we do bad things, they require justice. Now, the good news for us is that Jesus' death took on the justice that we deserve. Like it's like the wages of sin is death, is what Romans says. Like we all deserve to die because of our sins, but Jesus took on that death for us, right? But at the same time, it's like we all still are responsible for our actions. And I just felt like they let the bad guy off the hook a lot just to kind of prove some weird point, and I didn't like that at all. Didn't ruin the show for me. I still thought it was good. But that really, really bothered me. The best thing about the show is Oscar Isaac's acting. He can't win an Oscar for this, but he can definitely win an Emmy because it's a TV show. He was incredible. Because if you think about it, like, especially if you've watched the show, if you haven't yet, like he is acting in so many of these scenes alone because it's Mark and Steven talking back and forth. It's just Oscar Isaac playing both of these characters. And he does a fascinating job, especially in like that episode 5, like the really heart-wrenching one. It's just him for most of the episode playing Mark and Steven. One little tidbit that I learned as I was watching the show was that Oscar Isaac has a twin brother, and he actually used his brother to act off of, right? Because it was Oscar in 2 Oscars in most of the scenes, right? But as he's acting and doing both parts, his brother was acting on the other side of him, just kind of standing there. I thought that was a really, really cool tidbit. Oscar does an amazing job. Just put on an acting clinic. Absolutely carried the show. It was very, very good. Ethan Hawke, I already mentioned, was a really cool bad guy. And like I said, I really do think that this is the best of the new MCU shows on Disney Plus. So let me know what you guys think, what you thought about the show. and let me know what you thought about my thoughts about the show, and let me know what else you want me to cover down in the comments. Make sure that you hit subscribe button if you like the show. Hit the little bell, and I'll see you guys soon. I hope that you enjoy Moon Knight, and I hope that we get a season 2 or a movie or something. It's kind of up in the air right now, a little mysterious, kind of adding to the mystery, but I love Moon Knight, and I want more. Oscar Isaac. The show was phenomenal. Hope you guys enjoyed it as much as I did, and I'll see you soon.